The midday heat radiating off the cracked California asphalt was severe enough to visibly warp the air above the street, blurring the sharp modern edges of the loft building we both lived in. I stood on the sidewalk, holding my helmet by the chin bar, and stared at the discrepancy interrupting my normal Thursday routine. It was the floral dress, specifically. It was pressed right up against the matte black, heat-scarred fuel tank of my Scrambler. Sienna Ward, the boutique commercial architect who lived in the unit across the hall from mine, did not wear floral dresses. For the 2 years we had been neighbors, her wardrobe had consisted exclusively of armored corporate neutrals, tailored slates, sharp charcoals, and stark whites. She dressed like a woman who spent her days walking through active construction zones and her afternoons dismantling hostile contractors in glass boardrooms. Yet there she was, leaning casually against the 900cc twin-cylinder engine of my motorcycle in a pale pink summer dress, an olive-drab canvas duffel bag resting by the front tire. She possessed a faint, one-sided smile caused by a tiny, jagged fourth-grade bike scar on her lower lip. It was a useless, specific detail I had cataloged months ago during a brief conversation by the mailboxes. I knew she hated the scar, usually covering it with matte lipstick, but today it was bare, giving her an expression of dangerous, unbothered resolve. "You're standing on the exhaust side," I said, keeping my voice flat as I dropped my helmet onto the pavement beside my heavy leather work boots. "The pipes are wrapped, but they've been running for 40 minutes. If I had just ridden this in and parked it, you'd be missing a layer of skin off your calf right now." Sienna didn't step back. She didn't flinch away from the hot metal. She just looked at me, the hot ocean breeze catching the ends of her blonde hair and throwing them across her collarbone. "Last Tuesday in the elevator," she said, her voice carrying a steady, unnerving clarity over the distant sound of coastal traffic. "You joked that if I ever wanted to disappear, I should throw a bag in your truck and head north." I kept my hands in the pockets of my canvas work jacket. My right thumb immediately found the cracked glass of the old brass pocket compass I carried, a battered, uncalibrated piece of metal I used more as a grounding mechanism than a navigational tool. "I did say that," I acknowledged, feeling the jagged edge of the glass under my calluses. "I didn't think you heard me. You were actively fighting a conference call on your headset. Sounded like you were threatening to tear down a load-bearing wall with your bare hands." "I was," she said, her eyes never leaving mine. "But I heard you, Ryder." She bent down and picked up the canvas duffel bag. The fabric was heavy, and I watched the muscles in her forearm go taut with the effort of lifting it. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't offer a preamble. "Is the offer still good?" she asked. Her phone vibrated inside the bag before I could answer. She opened it, read the message, and the color went out of her face. On the screen was a notice from Vector Holdings, the developer trying to buy her firm. They had filed an emergency action claiming she had abandoned a private tract in the coastal range. If she could not appear at the property with the original land grant before a county inspection at 6 the next morning, their lawyers would ask the judge for a temporary preservation order that would freeze the land and give Vector control of the development corridor beside it. The property was not just an asset. It was the deed to her independence, and the final payment on her downtown project was being held until she surrendered it. They want the land," she said. "The old forestry cabin, the ridge and the access road. The parcel borders their next development site. They are using the withheld construction payment to drain my firm while they argue that I walked away from the property." The phone vibrated again. A message from Mara Ellis, her project manager, appeared beneath the legal notice. "Staff payroll due Friday. Need a decision." Sienna locked the screen. Her fingers remained around the phone long after it went dark. I had spent most of my adult life avoiding permanent arrangements, month-to-month leases, contracts that ended before anyone could call them a career, a motorcycle that was fun for coffee and a test rig built for emergencies, never for carrying a life. I knew how to get a damaged vehicle through bad terrain. I knew how to leave before a place could ask me to stay. What I didn't know was why Sienna had chosen me. But I knew the mountain road, I knew the rig, And I knew the difference between somebody asking to run away and somebody asking for 12 hours to reach the one place where she could still make a decision for herself. "Where's the original?" I asked. "In a lockbox under the cabin floorboards. I also have a current boundary survey, the county parcel map, and the old chain of title records." She swallowed once. "The documents are useless if I can't get them in front of the clerk before the inspection. I called my attorney, but his plane was grounded in San Francisco. Mara is trying to keep the office open. Everyone keeps asking me what to sign. Do you want me to handle the drive, or do you want to decide the route?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. The question appeared to surprise her more than the truck would have. "You know the route." "Then I'll drive. You decide what happens when we get there." She nodded once. That was enough. I picked up my helmet and walked right past the motorcycle. "The bike is for getting coffee," I said, my boots crunching on the loose gravel of the alleyway as I headed toward the heavy, reinforced steel doors of the building's loading dock. "If we're disappearing, we take the rig." I keyed the access code into the keypad. The heavy steel door rolled up with a grinding mechanical protest, revealing the cavernous concrete-walled garage where I kept my actual work vehicle. I hit the bank of halogen lights, and the heavy yellow glare illuminated the custom long-travel suspension truck I used for off-road chassis testing and expedition logistics. It wasn't a commuter vehicle. It was a machine built strictly for navigating disasters. Reinforced with quarter-inch steel skid plates, tubular steel bumpers, and a 12,000-pound hydraulic winch. It sat on massive 37-inch mud-terrain tires, the heavy-duty King bypass shocks gleaming silver and blue in the harsh light. Sienna didn't hesitate at the sight of the aggressive machinery. She walked past the oversized tires, opened the heavy passenger door, and hoisted herself into the cab. I walked around to the driver's side, throwing my helmet into the steel bed before climbing in behind the wheel. The interior of the cab smelled of ozone, old leather, and diesel fuel. A canvas thermos and 2 paper cups sat in the center console. She took one. The heat settled between her hands as I slotted the key into the ignition and turned it. The heavy block engine fired up with a concussive roar, the vibration rattling loose change before settling into a deep, steady idle. We cleared the city limits in under 40 minutes. The Pacific opened beside us, bright enough to hurt. Sienna's phone never stopped moving in her hands. "He finally crossed a line?" I asked. "Your ex-husband?" She looked up. "David? I haven't spoken to him in 3 years." The guest left a clean silence between us. I had lived across the hall from her for 2 years and still knew less about her life than the sound of her elevator key. "It's Vector Holdings," she said. "Victor Hale is their counsel. They're withholding the final payment on my downtown project while claiming my grandfather's land was abandoned. If the judge freezes the parcel, they control the access road beside their development and can keep my firm under financial pressure until I sell." "And Mara?" 17 employees are waiting for payroll. She told me not to sign anything." I snapped down the sun visor before glare reached her eyes and turned the air vents toward her shaking wrists. "I'll get you to the inspection," I said. "You'll make the argument." Mara called a minute later. She confirmed that Deputy Ortiz would document the property, that the clerk had an emergency inbox, and that payroll could survive only until Friday. I told her to timestamp the current survey and parcel map. When she asked who I was, Sienna answered for me. "The neighbor with the truck." "Don't let Sienna sign anything alone," Mara said. "She won't," I replied. Sienna turned toward me. That sounded like an order. It was a promise. For several miles, she studied the survey across her knees. Vector's map began at the cabin foundation. Hers began at the old timber line. "They're trying to win with a cleaner picture," she said. "The ugly one usually has more information." I took the long coastal route instead of the faster interstate. She needed a few hours where no one could demand a signature. At the next red light, she handed me half a sandwich from Mara's paper bag. The cab grew quieter as she ate the other half. By late afternoon, the bright coastal sun gave way to a dense, rolling marine layer pushing in from the ocean. The road narrowed. The signal on Sienna's phone disappeared, returned, and disappeared again. "If we lose contact, Mara has the documents," she said. The pavement finally ended at a Forest Service gate. I stopped, checked the lock, and switched the truck into four-wheel drive. The GPS screen on the dash showed a blank gray void. The digital maps hadn't updated this sector of the Mendocino Range in a decade. We turned onto a rutted Forest Service road that immediately began testing the truck's suspension. The marine layer thickened, rolling up the mountainside and turning into a driving, freezing rain. The steep dirt switchbacks instantly became a slick, unpredictable mix of deep mud and loose shale. I reached down and threw the transfer case lever into four-wheel drive high. The mechanical clunk of the gears engaging was a solid, reassuring sound in the dark cab. "The map is never the terrain," I said quietly, downshifting into third gear as we crawled over a deeply washed-out rut that threatened to throw the truck off the side of the mountain. "Digital lines don't mean anything out here. We deal with the mud in front of us." Sienna held the survey flat against her thighs. "What does the map say about the next mile?" "That it is a lie." "Useful. It's accurate about the lie." Her laugh was small, but it stayed in the cab after the road took it away. 10 miles into the ascent, the steering wheel jerked violently in my hands, nearly snapping my thumbs. A sharp, explosive sound of escaping high-pressure air hissed over the roar of the diesel engine. The front right corner of the truck dropped severely, sending a jarring vibration through the chassis. We had clipped a jagged, buried shale shelf hiding beneath a pool of standing water. The front right tire had completely blown its bead, the heavy steel rim grinding directly into the mud. I immediately killed the headlights, shifted into neutral, and set the heavy mechanical parking brake. The rain drummed against the roof. Sienna looked at the dark slope beyond her window, then at me. I reached for my waterproof jacket. "Stay in the cab." I started, then stopped. The old reflex was already moving faster than thought. I looked at her instead. "The ground outside is unstable. Do you want to stay inside while I change it, or help me from the passenger side with the work light?" Sienna's gaze sharpened. "If I stay inside, you'll try to do everything alone." "That is one possibility." "Then I'll hold the light." She reached for the door handle. "Put on the spare rain shell behind your seat." "You said the mud was calf deep." "I also said the shell was behind your seat." She found the folded shell, pulled it over the floral dress, and stepped out beside me. The rain struck the hood of the truck hard enough to bounce. I pushed into the freezing rain, dropped the tailgate, unstrapped the full-size spare, and dragged the high-lift jack through the mud. Sienna came around the front with the aluminum work light. She held it from the stable side of the ditch, exactly where I needed the beam. "You're standing too close to the drop," I said. "Then tell me where the ground is solid." I pointed with the breaker bar. "2 steps left, keep your boots behind that root." She moved without argument. The light settled over the axle. I sank ankle-deep before reaching the front bumper. The rain hid the jacking point until Sienna angled the beam across the welded bracket. "There," she said. "The welded plate under your left hand." "You didn't see it," she said. "I was testing you." "You're a terrible teacher." We fell into an efficient rhythm. I broke the lug torque and raised the jack while she kept the beam steady. When the wheel lifted clear, Sienna crouched beside the magnetic tray on the bumper. "Your lug nuts are different sizes," she said. "2 locking nuts?" "I've been paying attention since the elevator." The words landed harder than the rain. I wrestled the dead tire off and muscled the spare onto the hubs. Sienna handed me each lug nut from the magnetic tray. When I finally torqued the last lug nut to spec and threw the release lever on the jack, the heavy truck slammed back down onto the suspension. A thick spray of liquid brown mud shot from beneath the fresh tire, splattering across the front of her rain shell and the hem of the floral dress. She stared at the mud covering her dress. For a second, I expected the misery to break her. Instead, a sudden, genuine laugh burst out of her chest. It wasn't a polite corporate chuckle. It was real, and it shattered the storm. Rain ran down my face as I found myself smiling back. "Your dress is ruined," I said. My dress was already having a difficult day. "The jacket survived. Because you made me wear it." "You're welcome." The moment existed, brief and bright in the freezing darkness, demanding nothing from either of us. We packed the gear into the bed and climbed back into the heated safety of the cab. Sienna removed the rain shell and found a clean towel behind her seat. "Hold still. You have grease on your forehead." She leaned across the console and wiped the mark away. Her fingers paused near my temple, not touching, waiting for a decision. I held still. She finished, folded the towel and sat back. The truck's electrical system booted up. Sienna's phone caught a faint cellular signal from a distant ridge tower. She read the top email. The warmth drained from her face. "The clerk moved the inspection forward," she said. "Deputy Ortiz and a private surveyor are already at the cabin. The judge will review the preservation request after the deputy records the grant. Survey and boundary markers." She dropped the phone onto the center console, staring blankly out at the rain-lashed windshield. If the order stands, they freeze the land. If the payment stays frozen, Mara can't release the crews. I reached out, pulled the transmission into first gear and looked at the dashboard clock. "We have exactly 4 hours until sunrise," I said. "We are 30 miles out. Put your seatbelt on." She did. Then she reached into the duffel and pulled out a second flashlight. "I'm recording the inspection if the county allows it." "Ask before you film." She glanced at me. "You're learning." The logging road deteriorated rapidly as we climbed higher into the coastal range. The rain intensified, turning the dirt track into a rushing river of liquid mud. I relied on the cracked brass compass sitting in the center console and my topographic memory of the ridgelines, navigating blindly through dense, fog-choked timber. At 3 a.m., the headlights caught a massive washout. The road simply ended, consumed by a recent mudslide that had torn away the side of the mountain. A steep, unstable, rocky ravine was the only possible path forward, choked with fallen timber and slick shale. I stopped the truck. The engine idled. Rain slid down the windshield in crooked lines. Sienna opened the county map on her phone and turned the brightness down. "The old survey shows a service cut west of the road," she said. 30 yards past the washout. "The service cut is gone." "Then what are you looking at?" I touched the compass through my glove. "The ridge. The map is never the terrain." I looked at her. "You remembered?" She folded the map. "If you want to turn around, say so. I won't call it failure." For years, I had treated turning around as a form of intelligence. In test driving, knowing when to stop protected the vehicle, the data, and the people inside it. In everything else, the habit had become convenient. Leave before a promise became a responsibility. Take the long way home until nobody could tell whether you had ever intended to arrive. I looked at the washout again. "I can try the ravine," I said. "It's dangerous. You can tell me to turn back, and I will." Sienna tightened her seatbelt and placed the phone in its mount. "Go," she said. "I'll monitor the telemetry and call out the rear angle." I engaged both front and rear electronic differential lockers. She placed one hand on the steel grab handle above her door and one on the tablet mount. Her knuckles went white, but her voice remained level. "You have 3 feet on the left." I feathered the throttle, letting the massive tires crawl up the sharp rock face. The heavy truck tilted at a severe angle, the steel chassis groaning under the torsion forces. Halfway up the ravine, the rear tires broke traction, spinning wildly on wet shale. Gravity began pulling the 7,000-pound rig backward toward the sheer drop below. My instincts screamed at me to slam on the brakes, but I knew the suspension and weight distribution. Braking would lock the tires and guarantee a slide. I took my foot off the brake and applied the throttle instead. The sudden spike in wheel speed threw rocks and mud into the dark. The aggressive tread finally bit into a solid root structure beneath the shale. The truck lurched forward, the front tires clawing over the lip of the washout before cresting the ridge and slamming down onto level ground. Sienna exhaled a breath she had held for almost a minute. She looked at the telemetry screen, then at my hands on the wheel. "You were right," she said. "About the route? About not trusting the map." The words sat between us while the truck climbed. We broke through the tree line as the sky turned bruised and pale. The cabin stood behind a rusted gate, with Victor Hale's black SUV parked across the access road. Victor, a private surveyor, and Deputy Lena Ortiz waited in the fog. "The inspection has begun," Victor said. Deputy Ortiz lifted her clipboard. "I'm documenting the property and the people present. I'm not ruling on title." The surveyor pointed to the cabin foundation. "Vector's map places the boundary here." Sienna stepped from the truck, dress stained with mud, spine straight. She opened the duffel, broke the wax seal, and handed Deputy Ortiz the yellowed 1922 land grant, the current survey, and the county parcel map. "Your map begins at the cabin," she said. "The recorded boundary begins 50 yards behind it, at the old timber line. Your vehicle is inside my parcel." The surveyor scraped moss from the nearest marker. A brass plate appeared beneath it, stamped with the original survey number. Victor's face tightened. "A historical grant does not resolve the present title dispute." "No," Sienna said. "But it proves there is one." She turned to me. "Do you want to give Deputy Ortiz the telemetry, or should I? You give her the documents, I'll explain the vehicle data." I handed Deputy Ortiz the thermal strip from the truck's sealed recorder. It showed us crossing the timber boundary at 5:48 a.m., 12 minutes before the deadline. She photographed the strip, the device, and the vehicle plate. "I can attach this to my report," she said. "The clerk will send the report to the judge. The judge decides the preservation request." Victor stepped closer. "You arrive with a mechanic and an antique paper, then expect the court to ignore an active development plan." "Ryder Morgan," I said when he asked who I was. "Off-road test driver. A tow mechanic. A witness to the road." Sienna faced him. "You withheld our construction payment to force a buyout. Now the county has the grant, the current survey, the boundary marker, and proof that we arrived before your deadline. The judge will decide." "Yes," she said. "That is why we came." Deputy Ortiz ordered Victor to move the SUV outside the documented boundary. He objected, but she repeated the order without raising her voice. "You can preserve your objection in writing. You cannot obstruct the inspection." When the vehicles left, Deputy Ortiz returned the grant to Sienna. "File the originals and survey together. I'll report what I observed." "Thank your neighbor," she added. "Most people arrive with a story and no coordinates." Sienna looked at me. "He has both." The first door had stopped closing. "I found her waiting beside my motorcycle," I said, holding Victor's former direction with my gaze even though he was already too far away to hear. I asked, "Waiting for someone?" She smiled. "I found him." Sienna turned toward me. "That was not how you asked it." "It was close. You said, 'Are you waiting for someone?'" The memory improved under pressure. "You also didn't ask me why I was there." "You told me enough." Her fingers tightened around the canvas envelope. "I was afraid if I explained everything, you would decide the trip was too much." "I almost did." She looked at the road, then back at me. "What changed your mind?" Instead, I touched the cracked compass in my pocket. "You asked me directly," I said. "I'm better with direct questions." The cabin door was secured with a rusted iron padlock. I reached for the bolt cutters in my tool bag, then stopped. "Do you want me to open it?" Sienna looked at the lock. "Yes." I cut the padlock and pushed the heavy wooden door open. The interior was freezing, smelling of dust, old pine needles, and years of complete isolation. "The feng shui in here is terrible," I said, attempting a small, dry joke to break the heavy quiet. The joke landed wrong. The adrenaline that had kept Sienna standing upright for 12 hours evaporated all at once. She walked to a dusty canvas chair and sank into it, her hands trembling as she pulled her knees close. "I didn't announce my departure," I asked first. "Do you want the room quiet?" Or do you want me to stay where you can see me? Her eyes lifted. Stay where I can see you. All right. I walked back to the truck, grabbed a waterproof tarp and my canvas tool bag. Over the next hour, I moved quietly around the perimeter of the cabin. I checked and secured the window latches, cleared debris from the chimney flue, and chopped dry firewood from the collapsed lean-to. Sienna remained inside with the documents spread across the table. Once, she came to the doorway with the current survey in her hand. The eastern marker is missing, she said. Then we document that it's missing? Vector will say we moved it. Did you? No. Then we don't invent certainty. We record the gap and let the surveyor explain it. She studied me for a moment. You really hate a clean answer. I hate an inaccurate one. She returned to the table. I built a fire in the stone hearth. When the flames caught, the cabin began to lose its cold one small degree at a time. Mara called again. Sienna put the phone on speaker. The clerk received the report, Mara said. The judge ordered the payment placed in escrow while the title issue is reviewed. Payroll is covered, and the field crews are waiting. Keep the permits active, Sienna said. We'll handle the rest with counsel. Come home with the papers, Mara replied. We'll keep the office standing. The call ended. Sienna lowered the phone. I thought saving the firm meant keeping everything in my hands. It usually means deciding which hands are allowed to help. She looked toward the fire. You're speaking from experience? I'm speaking from poorly maintained equipment. This time, she laughed. The judge's temporary preservation order arrived by email before sunrise had fully cleared the trees. It awarded the property to neither side. It barred Vector from the disputed corridor, kept the payment in escrow, and ordered a formal boundary review using the grant, current survey, and county records. It was a narrow, practical opening. Sienna read the order twice. Then she placed the phone face down beside the canvas envelope. We have time, she said. You have time to make the next decision. She watched the fire. You're going to leave after we get back, aren't you? The question entered the room more quietly than the rain. I could have made a joke about a test route in Nevada, a truck needing service, or every good trip ending before people became sentimental about it. Instead, I looked at the compass in my hand. The glass was cracked. The needle had never pointed north correctly since the day I found it in my father's workshop. I carried it anyway, because an imperfect instrument was still honest about its limits. I usually do, I said. Usually. I take the long way until nobody expects me to arrive. Sienna didn't reach for me. She didn't tell me I was safe or healed or allowed to be afraid. She simply pushed the thermos across the table. Then finish the coffee first, she said. You can decide after. I poured 2 cups. The coffee was cold and too bitter. She drank hers without complaint. For the first time in years, I stayed until the cup was empty. We returned to the city on the paved route after the county road crew closed the damaged section. Mara met us outside Sienna's office with a coat for Sienna, a clean shirt for me, and the revised escrow notice. The payment is protected for now, she said. The city will not release the final construction certificate until the title review is complete, but Vector cannot use the money as a private weapon. Sienna turned to me. I have to go inside. I know. You don't have to wait. The old reflex rose immediately. Leave before waiting became a promise. I looked at the building, at the glass doors and the people moving behind them. Then I looked at the truck, the mud dried along its sides, the damaged tire strapped into the bed. I'll wait, I said. Sienna held my gaze. That is a dangerous thing to say to an architect. Why? We build around it. She went inside. I waited beside the truck until the sun moved across the office windows. I did not drive to the garage or take the motorcycle toward the coast. When Sienna came back out, Mara followed with 2 folders. You're not allowed to make her firm your emergency project, Mara told me. I'm not qualified. Good. She already has enough qualified men creating problems. Sienna laughed, and Mara finally smiled. The formal boundary review took 6 weeks. The old grant, current survey, county records, Telemetry and Deputy Ortiz's report confirmed Sienna's parcel and her arrival before the deadline. Victor Hale challenged the evidence, but the court rejected it. The payment was released from escrow in stages. The crews finished the downtown project and the hostile buyout collapsed. Mara kept the office open. The crews finished their work and the private surveyor corrected the county map. Deputy Ortiz mailed the report with a note. Next time, use the paved road. Sienna framed the note beside the original land grant. I repaired the truck's tire and began accepting local testing contracts instead of taking every job across the country. I kept the work. I changed the distance. 3 months later, the bright coastal sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sienna's newly expanded independent architectural office in the heart of the city. The hostile corporate buyout had collapsed under the boundary review and the secured payment schedule. The massive drafting room was full of clients, contractors, city officials, and the employees who had nearly lost their paychecks 6 weeks earlier. Mara stood near the back with a clipboard, still managing the room as if someone might attempt an unauthorized acquisition during the champagne service. Deputy Ortiz had been invited, but couldn't attend. She had sent a framed copy of the inspection report instead. I stood near the back wall, leaning against a wooden drafting table, wearing the clean, dark button-down shirt Mara had given me after the storm. I had signed a 12-month lease on my loft the week before. The first permanent address I had chosen since I was 22 sat across the hall from Sienna's. Sienna stood at the front of the room in a tailored slate suit, commanding the crowd with effortless authority. The faint scar on her lower lip was bare again. She had stopped covering it during meetings. "This firm stands on the principle of solid foundations," she said. "Not perfect lines, not clean maps. Foundations that are tested, documented, and strong enough to hold when someone tries to move the boundary." Sienna continued. "The people who kept this firm standing did not all work in this office. Some carried documents. Some kept crews paid. Some drove through a washed-out mountain road before dawn. And one person reminded me that a route is only an estimate until you see the ground yourself." Her eyes found mine. I felt the old instinct to remain in the shadows. It was familiar, efficient, and almost comforting. Then Sienna lifted her hand toward the crowd. "Ryder," she said, "come stand with me." The room turned. This time, I did not wait for a reason that would make the choice safe. I stepped away from the drafting table and crossed the room. I stood beside her, publicly and deliberately, while Mara began the applause. Sienna did not take my hand. She didn't need to. Her shoulder touched mine for 1 second, then stayed there. In my pocket, my thumb traced the cracked glass of the old brass compass I had never recalibrated. The map was never the terrain. The road, the rain, and the woman standing beside me had shown me what was actually in front of me. I had spent years believing trust meant surrendering control. Sienna taught me that it could mean asking the question, choosing the route together, and staying long enough to see the ground. When the applause faded, she leaned closer. "Are you going to take the long way home?" she asked. I looked through the glass at the bright street outside, at the motorcycle parked beside the curb, and the truck waiting in the garage. "Not tonight," I said. She smiled. And this time, I knew exactly where I was. The end. Closing thoughts. Core lesson. Healthy love is built through consistency, showing up when the road becomes difficult, asking before taking control, and staying when leaving would be easier. Green flag. Real love does not erase your agency or decide your future for you. It gives you room to choose, respects your boundaries, and stands beside you when the choice becomes difficult. What small act of care has ever made you feel truly seen? Share it in the comments. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe so we can share more stories like this.